Welcome to Life Stories, where real life experiences unfold and lessons are learned. Today, we share a journey of betrayal, family secrets, and the quest for freedom. This is the story of a woman who, after years of manipulation and control, finally uncovers the truth behind her family's lies and begins to rebuild her life. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes we must break free from the past to truly move forward. So, sit back, relax, and let's begin today's story. Please subscribe to the channel to stay updated with more inspiring life stories. My earliest memories are filled with the sound of shouting. My dad's voice would boom through our small house, making the walls seem to shake. It was as if every word was a thunderclap, and it always felt like the storm was about to destroy everything around it. My mom, in her quieter moments, would try to keep her voice down, probably thinking of me and my younger sister Emily, but sometimes, she couldn't help but shout back. I was 7 then, and Emily was just 2, too young to really understand what was happening. I remember one morning, watching Mom brush Emily's hair, her fingers gently moving through the strands as she sang softly to her. The melody was quiet, soothing, and in that moment, I could almost forget the chaos that swirled around us. That was the last time I saw her do that. Later that day, the shouting started again, louder and more intense than ever before. I don't remember the exact words, but I do remember Mom's voice cracking as she screamed, "You're impossible, Robert. You control everything I do, everyone I talk to." It felt like her soul was unraveling in that moment, and I felt helpless. I didn't know what was happening, only that the world around me was falling apart. The divorce came quickly after that. One day, Mom was just gone. Dad told us she had left us, that she had chosen alcohol and other men over her own daughters. At 7, I was old enough to feel confused and betrayed, but still young enough to believe him completely. In my heart, I didn't want to question him. He was the one left behind to pick up the pieces, and surely that made him the one telling the truth. So, I believed his version of events without hesitation. It wasn't long before Dad brought Sarah home. She was younger than Mom, always smiling, and she clearly adored Emily. Emily, with her innocent heart, took to her immediately, calling her Mommy within weeks. I couldn't do that, though. Every time Sarah tried to hug me or do my hair the way Mom used to, I would pull away, unable to let her in. Dad would look at me sternly, as if I was the one in the wrong. "Sarah is trying her best. You need to be more grateful," he would say. But how could I be grateful? I still had a mother, one who was out there somewhere. Where was she? Why didn't she call? Why didn't she fight to see us? These questions haunted me through my childhood, but I learned quickly to keep them to myself. Meanwhile, Sarah doted on Emily. She bought her pretty dresses and took her to dance classes, showering her with love and affection. I was invited to join them, but I always refused. It hurt too much to watch my sister build a relationship with someone I didn't want to accept. Instead, I threw myself into books, spending hours in my room, studying. It was easier than facing the growing distance between me and my sister. Emily was becoming more and more Sarah's daughter, while I remained stubbornly on the outside. But I had a plan. I knew that if I could get out, I could escape this house, this family dynamic that had wrapped me in a web of confusion and pain. As the years passed, Emily's bond with Sarah deepened, and I could feel myself slipping further away from them both. I focused on my education, knowing that it was my only ticket to freedom. While Emily was being groomed to be the perfect daughter, I was plotting my escape through college applications and scholarship essays. Finally, at 18, I was free. College felt like breathing fresh air after being submerged underwater for far too long. My dorm room might have been tiny, but it was mine. No Sarah hovering over me, no dad dictating rules. For the first time in years, I was truly on my own, away from the family that had suffocated me for so long. Despite the newfound freedom, I still came home during breaks, trying to maintain some connection with Emily. I didn't want to lose her completely, even though it felt like we were worlds apart. During one of these visits, in my final year, I found Emily in her room, which looked like a princess's chamber, all pink and white, thanks to Sarah's obsession with decorating. I sat beside her, trying to make conversation. "So, what are your plans after graduation?" I asked, settling into her window seat. "Have you thought about which colleges you might want to apply to?" Emily, sprawled across her bed, barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, I'm not going to college," she said casually. "I'm getting married." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Married? You're not even 18 yet. When did this happen?" She finally looked up from her phone, her eyes sparkling. "Sarah introduced me to Marcus last year. His family owns that big real estate company downtown, Preston Properties. They're loaded, Chloe, and he's absolutely perfect." The words felt like they were coming from a world I didn't recognize. A world where dreams of education and independence were quickly being replaced by a life I couldn't fathom for myself. I tried to reason with her, reminding her of the dreams she used to talk about: becoming a teacher, making a life for herself outside of our family's expectations. But Emily just waved me off, dismissing those thoughts as kid stuff. "Sarah says I don't need college anyway," she continued. "A woman's real purpose is to create a family and have children. Why waste time with degrees when I can start my real life now?" I gripped my coffee mug tightly, the urge to lecture her about independence and self-worth rising in my chest. But instead, I stayed quiet, because what could I say? This was her life, her choice, even if it didn't align with everything I had worked for. As college came to a close, I felt like I had finally secured the independence I had longed for. I had escaped the tight grip of my father's control and the suffocating expectations that came with being part of our family. I had built a life that was my own, free from constant judgment and manipulation. My apartment was small, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. No more worrying about surprise visits. No more walking on eggshells around Dad or Sarah. For the first time, I was in charge of my own life. But even though I had left, I couldn't fully escape the family. The ties were still there, and they pulled me back every so often. I'd come home during breaks, trying to keep in touch with Emily, but the distance between us only grew with each visit. She seemed happier with Marcus and their perfect little family, and I was becoming more and more like an outsider in my own home. It wasn't long before the familiar interruptions began. Emily would call me up, asking if I could babysit for her, or worse, dropping by unannounced with her kids, expecting me to watch them without any warning. At first, I didn't mind too much. They were my niece and nephew, after all, and I wanted to be part of their lives. But the visits became more frequent, and soon, I was stuck in a cycle of constantly putting my own life on hold to accommodate theirs. The first time it happened, I was in the middle of a project for work, the kind of task that required focus and a clear mind. I was sitting at my desk, trying to get through the numbers when Emily appeared at my door, wearing a pristine outfit that looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine. She had 2 baby bags slung over her shoulder, and James, her toddler, was tugging at her leg, while Emma, the infant, was in her arms. I barely had time to process what was going on before Emily said, "I have a spa appointment. Can you watch them for a couple of hours?" Before I could even respond, she was gone. I was left standing there, holding my breath, trying to figure out how to manage 2 young children while also juggling my work responsibilities. I didn't even have time to settle into my desk again before I heard a cry from Emma, followed by James asking if I could get him a snack. It was chaos, pure and simple. The next time it happened, it was worse. Emily showed up on a Saturday morning, just as I was settling into a weekend of much-needed relaxation. She was on her way out again, leaving me with 2 children and no warning. James likes his stuffed elephant for nap time, and Emma might need a diaper change soon, she said, as if this was just another casual favor. And then, just like that, she was gone. I tried to manage. I really did. I tried waking up earlier, working late into the night, even sacrificing weekends, but nothing worked. The demands from Emily, and the underlying pressure from my father, never stopped. I was expected to drop everything at a moment's notice because Emily had a schedule she couldn't alter. Meanwhile, my own work was slipping, and my boss had started to notice the errors in my reports. Small mistakes, but mistakes that could have serious consequences. It felt like I was drowning, constantly running to keep up with everyone's expectations. One day, after Emily had dropped the kids off yet again, I couldn't take it anymore. I had suggested, in passing, that maybe she could ask Sarah or Dad to watch the kids sometimes. But she brushed it off. Sarah says the noise gives her migraines, she replied. And Dad's always at work. It was always the same excuse. No one else could help. But I was supposed to handle it all. It wasn't just the kids, it was the weight of their expectations. And I was slowly losing myself under it. I had a breaking point. And it came on a Tuesday. The day of a crucial deadline at work. James was particularly energetic, bouncing off the walls, and Emma was in a fussy mood. I turned my back for just a second, hoping to get a little more work done, when I heard the thud. James had been jumping on the couch, something I had told him not to do countless times, and he had fallen off. At first, he seemed fine, but by the time Emily came to pick them up, a purple bruise had spread across his shin. The moment she saw it, she exploded. "What the hell, Chloe?" she screamed, making both kids burst into tears. "I trust you with my children. And this is how you watch them?" He could have been seriously hurt. Her words were sharp and cutting. And I felt my chest tighten. The weight of years of resentment, of being taken for granted, all came flooding back. "Maybe if you actually watched your own kids, they wouldn't be in this situation," I muttered, my voice laced with anger. But she didn't hear me. Instead, she cut me off, her voice filled with venom. "I knew I shouldn't have left them with you. You're so irresponsible." In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the years of being the difficult daughter, of always putting my life on hold for everyone else's convenience, it all came pouring out. "Get out," I said quietly, but with a firmness that surprised even me. "Take your kids and get out of my apartment." The words were like a weight lifted from my chest. I had finally said it. Finally stood up for myself after years of being the family's doormat. It felt like a victory. But it came at a price. Emily's shocked expression, the confused tears from the kids, and the loud silence that followed, they all lingered in my mind as I closed the door behind them. I wasn't just angry, I was tired, I was done. The aftermath of my confrontation with Emily was everything I had expected it to be and nothing like I had imagined. The silence that followed felt heavy, as though the very walls of my apartment were pressing in on me. I stood there, heart pounding, hands shaking, yet somehow relieved. I had finally stood up for myself in a way that I had never been able to before. But as the initial wave of anger subsided, a gnawing feeling of uncertainty took its place. What had I just done? Was this the right choice? It didn't take long for the calls to start. My phone buzzed constantly, each notification a reminder of the family I had just distanced myself from. Dad's voice, sharp and angry, filled my voicemail inbox. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he yelled, followed by the sound of him taking a deep breath, clearly trying to control his temper. "Your sister is crying her eyes out. How dare you treat her this way?" The message was clear. I had crossed a line. But in that moment, all I could think about was the years of manipulation and control I had endured. The years of being the responsible one. The one who always put everyone else's needs ahead of my own. I had been expected to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, but where was the appreciation? Where was the acknowledgement of the sacrifices I had made for them? I wasn't ready to answer Dad's angry calls. Not yet. Instead, I took refuge in the quiet. In the peace I had created for myself. I told myself that I had earned it. That I deserved to finally live a life where I wasn't constantly at the mercy of my family's demands. But the pressure kept building. And soon, Dad's words started to get to me. "If you don't start showing more respect to your sister and treating your family better, you can forget about your inheritance. I'll leave everything to Emily." His threat echoed in my mind. The inheritance. It had been something my father had wielded over me for as long as I could remember. The carrot he dangled in front of me, promising that if I just followed his rules, if I just played my part, I would be rewarded. But what had it all been worth? The inheritance wasn't just about money, it was about control. And now, he was using it to manipulate me once again. As if that weren't enough, I found myself on the receiving end of a public post from Dad. It pains me to write this. It began, but today I officially disown my eldest daughter, Chloe. She has betrayed not only me but our entire family, abandoning her sister and young niece and nephew at Christmas to pursue her own selfish desires. The words stung, even though I knew they weren't true. The post was filled with lies, distortions of the truth that painted me as a villain in their narrative. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at the hypocrisy. Sarah, my stepmother, had added her own commentary about how modern values were destroying family bonds. The more I read, the more I realized that this was all about one thing: control. But I wasn't going to let their lies define me. I wasn't going to let them paint me as the bad guy anymore. I sat at my desk, fingers trembling as I typed a response. I couldn't just let this go. I had to share the truth that had been hidden from me for so many years. For years, I believed what my father told me about my mother. I wrote, my heart racing with every word. I believed that she abandoned us. That she didn't want us. That she chose alcohol and other men over her daughters. I believed him when he said we were better off without her. I paused, thinking of the anger, the hurt, the years of feeling abandoned by her. But then, I continued, today I learned that every word was a lie. My mother never abandoned us. She was pushed away by a man who used manipulation and lies to maintain control over his daughters, while he painted himself as our savior. The weight of those words felt both freeing and heavy. I was finally speaking my truth. Finally breaking free from the lies that had bound me for so long. It was time for the world to know what had really happened. And it was time for me to stop hiding in the shadows of my family's twisted version of reality. My heart pounded in my chest as I clicked post. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. No more lies, no more manipulation, and no more guilt. I had finally chosen myself. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The reactions from my family were everything I expected and nothing like I had imagined. The flood of messages from Dad, Sarah, and even Emily, each one more desperate than the last, felt like a storm I had no choice but to endure. They couldn't understand why I had chosen to walk away, why I had refused to play my part in their narrative anymore. But I knew deep down that this was the only way forward for me. For the first time in years, I wasn't controlled by fear or guilt. I wasn't bound by expectations that weren't my own. My life, for the first time, was mine to shape, to live freely without the weight of family manipulation holding me back. Months passed, and I found myself rebuilding the relationships that truly mattered. My relationship with my mother blossomed in a way I had never imagined possible. We began to share stories, memories, and experiences that had been buried for so long. Each conversation with her was like healing a wound I didn't know I had. We laughed, we cried, and we built a new foundation of trust and love. As for Emily, I didn't know what the future would hold. I wasn't sure if we would ever be close again, or if she would eventually see the truth of the manipulation that had shaped her. But for now, I was focused on myself, on learning to live without guilt, and on embracing a future that I could finally call my own. Life had taught me profound lessons about love, empathy, and the strength it takes to break free from the chains of the past. I had chosen my own path, and in doing so, I had learned that true freedom lies in embracing the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel to follow more life stories and the lessons they bring.